Welcome to our Wednesday morning board meeting. Today is Wednesday, April 27, 2022, and we'd like to welcome everyone to the board meeting. We'll call this meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. You can join today's board meeting via phone, dial 971-254-3149, conference ID 736-023-979#. Audio capabilities are listen only and are offered on the best effort to the public. Our meeting is also live streamed, and you can join us by going online at tctbonline.com and click on live broadcast. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to please mute your phones. You can do this by pressing *6. Please unmute your phone when your agenda item is ready to be discussed. For those joining via computer, please unmute your microphone and turn on your camera when your agenda item is called. All others must remain muted with their cameras turned off. Thank you. Public comments. Those intending to provide public comment to the board may attend in person or email submissions to publiccomments@co.tillamook.or.us. Public comments received by 12 p.m. on Tuesday will be distributed to the board, posted online before the meeting, and become part of the public record. You may also provide public comment virtually by registering ahead of time. To register, please email publiccomments@co.tillamook.or.us by 12 p.m. on the Tuesday prior to the board meeting. Public comments can also be mailed to the Board of Commissioners office, 201 Laurel Avenue, Tillamook, Oregon, 97141. For more information on public comment options, please visit the Board of Commissioners webpage. So, Isabel, do we have anyone signed up for public comment this morning?
We do not.
None, thank you. So again, I want to welcome everyone, and for those of you in the room, please make sure you sign our guest list. That would be greatly appreciated. Let's start the meeting this morning, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Scar, could you lead us, please?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I do want to make one quick announcement before we start the meeting. This is probably going to be our last meeting in this Commissioners Board meeting room A and B. We are swapping rooms with Circuit Court 108. We've always had a problem with Courtroom 108 being amenable and adequate for Circuit Court. So we are making that switch. This Commissioners meeting rooms A and B will become the new Circuit Court room, one of two in the building. Temporarily, our board meetings starting next week will be held in the Nestucca room, the Nehalem room. I always get those two mixed up. The Nehalem room in the basement, as we remodel the original Courtroom 108 to become our Board of Commissioners meeting room. And that's going to take 2, 3, maybe 4 months. So again, I just want to make that announcement. I'm hoping everyone will remind me to make this announcement again at the end of the meeting, because people come up here, they may find a court proceeding in progress. So just wanted to make that quick announcement. We have no public comments. Do we have any non-agenda items, Isabel?
We do not.
Nothing. Thank you very much. So let's move right into our business. First on the agenda is our consent calendar. Item number 5, a new winery, first location liquor license application for Buddha Cat Winery and off-premises application for Barview Jetty. This has been approved by our health department, I believe, isn't that?
Yes.
We'll go through. So this is just a consent calendar item. Any comments?
No.
Looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the consent calendar.
And I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
Linda may be here to make a comment on an agenda item. I didn't know if you wanted her to do it early.
I'm sorry, we should have asked. Linda, did you want to make a comment on an agenda item this morning?
Just to get on the agenda?
She has a resolution on the agenda.
Perfect. So can we bring you up when we do the resolution?
Yeah.
That would be great. And so you're further down on the list, I'm sorry. But you
Yes,
can
okay.
certainly sit right there.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So item number 6, discussion and consideration of an Oregon Department of Justice Crime Victim and Survivor Services Division 2021-2023 Children's Advocacy Center Fund Grant application. And with us this morning, we've got Under Sheriff Matt Kelly. Good morning, Under Sheriff.
Morning, Commissioners. Before you today is our proposal for a grant application that we're applying. We have 2 grants that are involved. Our CAMI Child Abuse Investigation. Tillman County has developed its own CAC, which is a Child Advocacy Center. This is a non-competitive grant that's just under $173,000. There's no match money. It's just we can use for that center. The main focus of this is that we can do interviews and provide resources to our most innocent victims here in county instead of having to travel to the valley to do these assessments and not add undue trauma to children and to make them go over to the valley and do these assessments.
Wow. Comments, concerns, questions?
I'm fully supportive.
Yeah, just to say, I'm fully supportive, and I appreciate this work being done in county, and I appreciate the difficulty of the work, so I think those would take it on.
This is very sad that we would have to provide these types of services, especially to children. Matt, again, we appreciate everything the Sheriff's Office does. It's sad that we have to do this, but again, this keeps some of the trauma from manifesting itself because they don't have to take that long drive into the valley to get services that they need. So, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of an Oregon Department of Justice Crime Victim and Survivor Services Division 2021 to 2023 Children's Advocacy Center Fund Grant application.
And I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Matt. I believe you've got the next item also. Item number 7, discussion and consideration of a contract for goods with Axon Enterprises, Inc. for body cameras in the Sheriff's Office. Again, Under Sheriff Matt Kelly.
Morning again. Before you is our contract that we're going forward for Axon body cameras. A little history, Tillman County we've had body cameras for a long, long time. Personally, I was probably one of the first people in the Sheriff's Office to buy one. I used to buy them just from Amazon. They're a wonderful resource just for court, keeps us out of court more often. It also, for transparency, it's not one person's word against another. It's all documented, what the contact or what a deputy said, what a civilian said. There's no question. So we have had body cameras. The camera system that we're using, our contracts up with them. Their cameras are a little antiquated, and so we have to upgrade. And we did a lengthy study on different camera systems, and this is the one that myself, the sheriff, and the deputies themselves liked and works really well. It's very user-friendly. And luckily, we had an opportunity to offset some of the costs with the ARPA funds for the first year, and then we'll pick it up and budget it for the next 4 years. And that's all I have, unless you all have any questions.
Perfect, thank you. Comments, questions?
No questions. I'm glad they're getting it.
Yeah, no questions, and I'm pleased to hear that we've had body cameras for a long time. There's certainly been a lot of push to have law enforcement have body cameras across the nation, and as usual, Tillman County is in the lead, so I appreciate that, thank you.
It's just become a tool for all law enforcement officers today. It protects the public, it protects the officers. It's a good thing to have as long as you can afford them. Yes. Okay, we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of a contract for goods with Axon Enterprise, Inc. for body cameras in the Sheriff's Office.
And I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. So Matt, I think, so the next item lists Sheriff Brown, but I think you're gonna handle item number 8. Oh, I see Sheriff Brown also. Let me read it. Item number 8, discussion and consideration of a contract for goods with Scissorex Government Services, Inc. for a body scanner in the Sheriff's Office. So, Sheriff Brown, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. So to kind of jump on what Under Sheriff Kelly was talking about is with the body cameras, we have had them for quite a few years, and this is going to be a newer product and far superior. something I've talked about a lot recently, or the term I've used is what modern policing looks like these days. The cameras are pretty much becoming the norm. So it's not a question of want or desire. It's a question of need, just simply because this is kind of the direction that modern policing is going, and we need to keep up. So being able to get the body cameras is a really, really good thing for us to be able to keep up with modern policing. Along those lines, this body scanner for the jail is becoming a very normal thing in quite a few jails. If I don't know about the majority, but we're approaching the majority of the jails in Oregon. Youth detention facilities, etc., are going with these body scanners, and it is slowly but surely becoming part of modern policing. Especially when you expand into a corrections setting. So this particular body scanner, we did do a whole bunch of legwork last year, I believe it was, trying to determine which one was going to be the best. We've got multiple prices. There's multiple products. Most body scanners, especially the ones that are getting used in a lot of facilities, are more of a plus sign shape or a T shape. They just simply will not fit in our facility. We did, like I said, we did do a lot of legwork. We had one rep come out and actually lay a fabric pattern on our floor to try to see if there was anywhere it could fit, and it wouldn't. It's literally only one that our facility will work, or will work in our facility without doing major modifications. Quite honestly, the product itself is a phenomenal product, and it's going to have a tremendous amount of benefits to it. Where it sets up, and so that's kind of the back history to it. We have done our legwork looking for different products, and like I said, this is the best suited product for our facility. That being said, the contract itself, I have had a little bit of confusion, because initially we got a quote from a company called Tech 84. Then there were some questions, and I know Rachel is here. She may be able to help clarify if needed. But we had to get something along the lines of sole sourcing, and we ended up going through a company called Cicerex, who Tech 84 gets the product from. I believe that we'll be working with the Tech 84 representative to come out here and measure, make sure everything is all ready to go. So the contract is with Cicerex. I know there's been some questions about trying to get a purchase order number and location, etc. And I believe that some of that stuff is getting worked out. You guys may have even seen a purchase order early this morning to help Cicerex get what they need. But ultimately, that's what this is it's a contract for the body scanner in order to be purchased. The flip side to this, I believe the contract is for the full $189,000. We've already been approved for a CIS grant of $10,000, but it's a reimbursement grant, so we have to spend the money. The ARPA funds were approved in an amount of $179,000, so we'll have to essentially pay the $10,000 out of our budget, but then that CIS grant will be reimbursed once we have the product purchased and installed. So we have that little extra, and it also says something pretty big when the insurance company will give you a $10,000 grant, because the piece of equipment that you're installing is that valuable to them and what they do. So that's what we got.
Okay, so it sounds a little complex, but I guess single source, since this is the only one that'll fit in our building, no? Rachel?
No, we're using a cooperative purchasing program that's referenced in the exhibit section of the contract.
So then it's not a single source?
It is not a sole source justification.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, questions, comments?
No, I'm glad that the sheriff's office is getting this. I'm fully supportive. I was glad when the sheriff came to us with the request when we were discussing the use of ARPA funds. I think it'll be excellent for our staff and our facility.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement. I understand that, this is just our jail is our greatest area of risk as a county for where we can have things go wrong. And I know the sheriff is doing, a fabulous job as Lieutenant Silveira in making sure that our jail is run as a top-notch facility, and the desire to bring it up to modern standards as well. So we used the term modern policing earlier, and I think this is just what it takes to run a modern jail. So I'm pleased that ARPA funds were available, since this really was just too big of a stretch for our general fund budget. So I think this is a good opportunity to make good use of those funds.
I concur with everything that's been said. So I think we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of a contract for goods with Scissorex Government Services, Inc. for a body scanner in the Sheriff's Office.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Item number 9, we have Linda Hanratty with us this morning. Good morning. This is discussion and consideration of a resolution in the matter of proclaiming May 5th, 2022 as a day of prayer in Tillamook County. And Linda Hanratty is with the Tillamook County Wide Prayer Team. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for hosting us again.
Thank you for being
And
here.
I was looking back, I believe that we have been doing this since 1988 when it was first moved.
Wow.
So that puts us at 34 years of having a day of prayer in Tillamook County. And we just honor you and thank you for your support.
Thank you.
And so we'll be having a National Day of Prayer event, which will become a Day of Prayer in Tillamook County, on the courthouse front lawn on May 5th at noon. And you're all welcome. We have been very blessed to have a participant from your staff. So this is an old tradition. This is the 71st National Day of Prayer since it went in nationally. And it's been, presidents throughout time have called days of prayer for our nation. And this is for people of all faiths. So, I don't know, I'd like to give you all a book or a prayer, or would it be better to do it now or later?
A prayer?
Is it okay if I do a short prayer?
I think that would be fun.
So, okay, well, right now in Tillamook County, we have prayer that goes on all year long. And we're right in the middle of 50 days of prayer. And remarkably enough, today is the day to pray for our county leaders.
Wow, how about that?
I didn't pick that. I did not know that when I got this appointment.
And I believe all the commissioners are in receipt of that booklet, so we appreciate that very much.
Okay, Commissioner Aaron, do you?
I have a copy of that as well. We
Oh, very
received
good.
that.
Okay, so I'll just give you the updated, every year, we do an updated copy of the reading guide that has your names in it, so we can pray for you by name. And we're also praying for you by name every month. We have a program called One Church, One Day, and we pray every day a different church prays for you. And other issues in our county. There's many. So, and we're seeing good things come from that. So,
Thank you.
this is my prayer for you. Lord, we lift up those who are in positions of authority throughout this county, and all those who come alongside to provide for the day-to-day needs of our people. We pray blessing, wisdom, strength, and divine guidance for them. Surround them with wise counsel. Give them ears to hear your Holy Spirit guiding them into all truth. Give them great ideas and ability to lead our people. Help us as a people express our gratitude and encouragement for their service. We thank you, Lord, for our public servants and their families who support them. We pray for wisdom and discernment, help, protection, and strength. Give them courage to stand for uprightness. We pray for resources and finances to meet every need. And we thank you, Lord, that you guide them to perform their duties. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Linda. We appreciate that very much.
And this is being done in probably 3/4 of the churches of Tillamook County.
It's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
So, this is an item for consideration. Any discussion at all?
I'm delighted to participate in this. I've had the opportunity to participate in several years, and the year that we had the prayer train before COVID was so much fun. And last year we had it in the First Christian Church.
Yes.
And
good.
yeah, because of COVID. And I'm glad that we'll be back out on the courthouse steps again. And I just want to say that I am so very grateful for your prayers for us and for all community leaders. it means a lot. It means a lot to me to know that you're praying for us. And I hear it in the community. Pastor Sprinkle has been coming to our meetings, and he said, we're praying for you. And I had the delightful opportunity to sit with Harry Hewitt in the waiting room of Les Schwab Tires. And he said, I pray for you every day. And he showed me his prayer journal. And he said he prays for, I think he said 721 people a day.
Wow.
And it really, it's uplifting to us. And so thank you so very much for caring for our spiritual needs.
Well, we thank you for your sacrifice of time and energy and love for our county, and we want you to know that we love you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda, thank you. I've been invited and participated in your events on the front lawn of the courthouse also.
Yes.
And we appreciate everything you do for Tillamook County.
We will probably have another prayer train this fall.
Oh, nice.
Great.
We'll let you know when we have it all firmed up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Okay, moving on. Item number 10.
Approve that?
Oh, sorry. Looking for a motion.
So, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to read the resolution.
Please, yes.
Okay. In the matter of proclaiming May 5th, 2022 as a day of prayer in Tillamook County, Oregon, this matter came before the Tillamook County Board of Commissioners April 27th, 2022 at the request of Linda Hanratty, President of the Tillamook County-wide Prayer Team, and Doug Edwards of the Tillamook Christian Ministerial Association. The board, being fully apprised of the records and files herein, finds as follows. 1. The National Day of Prayer is a tradition first proclaimed by the Continental Congress in 1775. 2. The National Day of Prayer was established as an annual event by a joint resolution of Congress in 1952 and signed into law by President Truman. The law was amended in 1988 and signed by President Reagan, designating it as the first Thursday in May each year. 3. The Board of County Commissioners is grateful for the ecumenical work of the Tillamook County-wide prayer team in bringing Tillamook County citizens together to pray for our county and its citizens, the state, and the nation on this National Day of Prayer. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Tillamook County Board of Commissioners hereby proclaims Thursday, May 5th, 2022 as a day of prayer in Tillamook County, and invite citizens to observe this day in ways appropriate and significant to their personal practices of faith.
I'll take that.
I believe that was last year's.
Oh.
Because it's May 5th
Oh, shoot.
this year. It's okay. I think I have the modern one.
Oh, this is May 5th, 2022.
Oh, I thought you said a different date. So,
That's okay. That's okay.
Thank you. So we have a motion.
And I was second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
I want to give you your 3
Great.
books
Thank you.
for 2022.
Great.
Bless you. And God bless
Thank you
you.
so much for being here.
And God bless you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Very good. Let's now move on to item number 10, discussion and consideration of a personnel requisition for a new regular full-time registered environmental health specialist, 1 or 2, in the Health and Human Services Department. And with us this morning, we've got Marlene Putman, Administrator, Health and Human Services. Good morning, Marlene.
Good morning. Linda's still there.
She
just walked out.
Just left. So sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you to her for those kind words and for others in our faith organizations in the community that have sent us notes, cards, messages to our public health staff and our healthcare team, just offering their support and prayers for us during the pandemic. It's been nice to, we have some of them posted on refrigerators and just saying thank you and we appreciate your work. So it's nice to hear those words recognizing you all as our elected officials as well. So just wanted to share that and to thank her as well.
Thank you, Marlene.
So this, what we're talking about this morning on this item is an environmental health specialist, which we discussed actually during budget, not this year, but last year. So we worked on changing up the job description a little bit for the environmental health specialist, but also recognize that with the amount of the increase in the number of requests for inspections, whether it related to, you know, restaurants or pop-up events, those kinds of things, that we needed to hire another staff person. So this requisition is to do that. We have basically a manager and one other environmental health specialist to cover the entire county. So we're hoping to be able to recruit for a 1 or a 2 environmental health specialists to begin to try to meet that growing demand and perhaps get ahead of it a little bit. I know the workforce is tight, but we're hopeful, and this is in our budget for the current fiscal year to fill this position. So looking for your consideration of that request.
Perfect, thank you, Marlene. Discussion?
I think this is much needed, and I know Jamie's been working so hard since Annette retired, and I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to fill this.
And I am in agreement. Part of what has also happened is that the state has come in and looked at what we do and how we do it, and has said you need to be really on top of all of these events that are happening. You need to be there. It has given us, I think, a little bit more of a tighter marching order to say, we have to be on top of this. We have to be there. And I know the community is feeling that, and I just want to honor that we have found ourselves being tighter on churches, for example, that provide meals to those in need, on events that pop up for fundraisers. And I know that is distressing to organizations when we come in and say, we know you've been doing this for years, and the new regulations coming down from the state that we are required to enforce with you are more stringent, and we don't have a choice to say, no, we won't do it. They are required, and having another person on staff gives us the opportunity to be even more supportive with those organizations, and to be able to say, let us help you find the right answer and the way to absolutely ensure your organization is providing safe food, because that's really what it comes down to, is that no one become ill. So I've had the opportunity to work with Jamie quite a bit on some of the places, and I look forward to having an additional staff person so we can be supportive of those who are struggling with new rules and regulations around food safety and the enforcement thereof.
Perfect. And I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. This is a mandated service for the county. And Marlene, you're doing a great job, and we appreciate it so much. We do. So with that said, I think we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of a personnel requisition for a new regular full-time registered environmental health specialist, 1 or 2, in the Health and Human Services Department.
And I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Marlene, I believe you have item number 11 also. Discussion and consideration of amendment number 1 to the letter of agreement between Columbia Pacific Coordinated Care Organization and Tillamook County Community Health Center. Marlene Putman again, Administrator, Health and Human Services. Good morning again.
Yes, thank you. We spent some time last year talking about this agreement between Columbia Pacific CCO and Tillamook County. It relates to the allocation of funds from the CCO, or Coordinated Care Organization, to Tillamook County in the event that we hit our targets. And those include our quality metrics, but also cost of care metrics for serving our Medicaid populations. This agreement doesn't just address receiving what is called an upside risk, meaning we get some dollars if we hit those targets, but also the downside risk. So if we don't hit those, then there's a cost that we pay back from the health center for not meeting those. This agreement, as we discussed previously, really addresses how that all works. This current modification addresses 4 things. It basically first changes the name of the agreement slightly. That's not substantive, we're not worried about that one. And even the others we're really not concerned about, but I can detail those out quickly. So the second one is replacing the attachment A with a new attachment. So what is attachment A? So attachment A now includes language pertaining to substance use as a key area for cost savings and quality improvement. It was identified by Columbia Pacific CCO as a priority by the board, and that includes Commissioner Scarver serves on there, myself, who both serves on there. And it highlights the need of each county, local community within our region to identify areas of how we can improve that quality of care and engage people in substance use treatment, support, early intervention, and prevention. So this establishes a new, what they call PMPM. I know I'm using lots of phrases, but that's a per member per month target to identify improvement opportunities. So if we identify strategies, we identify some specific things we're going to measure, and we hit those, then they establish a per member per month value. Might be 50 cents, might be $1, and we can reinvest those in these types of services. So attachment A adds that to this agreement around substance use. The next is attachment C, which details, actually deletes attachment C, which had a whole lot of detail about how risk share is determined, and then adds attachment D, which is an illustration of how that allocation is distributed between the county and the CCO. It's a much simpler version. It's easier for me to understand. I don't know if it's easier for everybody else, but it basically says if you're on what I call the downside risk, so we owe something back, CARE Oregon and Columbia Pacific takes 70% of that risk, and they balance the 30% of the downside then gets distributed among our CCO partners, including us. On the upside, CARE Oregon keeps 50%, and the CCO then takes 25%, and we distribute the balance, 25%, among all of our partners in the county. So you can see they carry the bigger risk, but they also get some of the upside as well when we have some positive outcomes. So that's what's in the attachment D addition. And that comprises the amendments to this agreement, which have also been presented to County Council and is now before you for your consideration and approval.
Perfect. Comments? Questions?
I think it's interesting that they're incentivizing care in that way, that will be paid more for providing and have to pay back for not providing. It's an interesting model, but I'm certainly glad we're participating.
Yeah, and I'm really pleased that we are participating. This has been available through the CCO since they started, and originally Tillamook County had opted out of the risk share just because they weren't sure what that was going to look like. And just from a conservative sort of, let's make sure we don't get into trouble we can't manage, had stayed out of it. And during that time, Columbia and Clatsop counties received at least $1 million each in risk share money that is at that point unrestricted. So it goes back to the community to spend in the ways that they most need to spend it, related to health, of course, and that can be social determinants, such as housing or those sorts of things, or it can be directly into medical. So it's an opportunity for us, and the history of the Columbia Pacific CCO has been very positive from the bottom line perspective, and that risk share has been a good thing. So we can't guarantee that into the future. It's like any investment. But we have good reason to believe that it will be positive for our community. So I'm pleased that we are entering into the risk share agreement to provide that opportunity in Tillamook County.
It is interesting the way they're incentivizing this with both an upside and a downside if you don't meet the metrics. But Marlene, I've got utmost confidence in you. I do. I'm not concerned about this at all. So again, I appreciate all of your work on this. I do. So with that, I think we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of amendment number 1 to the letter of agreement between Columbia Pacific Coordinated Care Organization and Tillamook County Community Health Center.
And a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Marlene. So.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to item number 12, discussion and consideration of a non-prevailing wage rate contract for construction with Olson Asphalt Maintenance LLC for the Netarts Landing Boat Launch Parking Area Repair Project. Wow, that's a mouthful. With us this morning, we've got Joanne Wolfley, Director, Parks Department. Good morning, Joanne.
Good morning. Yes, Netarts Landing boat launch parking area is in desperate need of some repair. We have some monstrous potholes there, and it is the most highly used boat launch facility that we have in the Tillamook County Parks Department. So we're looking at cleaning and crack filling and asphalt patching and overlay and seal coating and striping and all kinds of fun stuff to bring the parking lot up to the level that it needs to be to continue to be used. The overall cost is $46,090, and Olson Asphalt Maintenance LLC is an awesome company, and we're hoping that you would agree and move forward with this.
Perfect. Comments?
Thanks, Joanne. I think that's great. I have driven around some of the potholes in that parking lot, and they're extreme, even for Tillamook County standards, they're extreme.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, no, I agree. Our boat launches are such an important part of the recreation here in Tillamook County. So I think that we definitely need to repair these problems.
Yeah. As long as we have the funds for it.
Yes.
And Joanne, you're doing a great job at the Parks Department. We appreciate what you're doing. So with that, I think we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of a non-prevailing wage rate contract for construction with Olson Asphalt Maintenance LLC for the Netarts Landing Boat Launch Parking Area Repair Project.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Can I ask Joanne a question
Thank
before
you,
we let her get
Joanne.
away?
Yeah, absolutely. Joanne, you've got a question coming.
So Joanne, I just wanted to check in on the Memaloose boat ramp. I had some questions. I was at the CCA banquet over the weekend, which has a lot of our fishermen, and they were wondering what the timeline on that might be, and I thought maybe we could just get a quick update if you have a minute. I know we've been waiting for the Army Corps of Engineers.
ODFW would like it if we would do it before September, because that is when it really gets busy. But we're shooting more towards the end of August and the beginning portion of September. We're at the the permitting process has been challenging, I'll say that. But we're at the very end of the permitting process, and I'm going to be bringing some documentation forward to Rachel and Joel on the call for bid. And so we're almost there. Here it comes.
Yay, thank you so much. I know that's been
You're
a
welcome.
big desire, big need, and that you've been doing all you can. So thank you for the update.
I know with these
Thank
federal
you.
agencies in particular, you think you have all of your ducks lined up and ready to go, and then something changes and more requirements. So I know you'll keep on top of that in case that might happen again. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 13, discussion and consideration of a grant application resolution to comply with ORS requirements for participation in the County Assessment Function Funding Assistant Grant, the CAFA grant, for fiscal year 2022-2023. And with us this morning, we've got Denise Vandekovering, County Assessor. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Yes, I'm here today to get the board chair's signature on the CAFA grant. This is, again, CAFA stands for County Assessment Function Funding. This is a grant that was implemented back in the late 80s by the Oregon legislature to help counties have funding for their property tax systems in Oregon. So the money for this grant comes from delinquent interest, that a portion of the delinquent interest that's paid on property taxes, and a fee that's collected on most documents that are recorded in the county clerk's offices in Oregon. We estimate, it's based on our estimated expenses for the assessment, tax. We add in the BOPTA portion of the clerk's expenses, the distribution portion of the treasurer's office expenses, and the IS expenses to support these functions. This year, we estimate this grant to be about $400,000 for the county general fund. So I just need your signature, and I will submit that as soon as I can.
I'll tell you what, Denise, I'll sign it if you can double the amount of the grant. I'm
Wouldn't that
just
be
kidding.
wonderful?
Just kidding. Comments, concerns?
Denise, thank you so much for your work on this. I know it's a significant portion of funding, and also it's a significant lift. It's a lot of work for you and your office, and I'm really grateful to you, so thank you.
Yeah, and I agree, and I would encourage anyone who is curious at all about what it takes for tax and assessment to operate and do what they do, to take a look at the commissioner's website, the agenda, the application for this grant is attached. And I think that it ends up, the entire budget to do this work ends up being something like 2.7 million, and what we're receiving is
Yes.
400,000 and change. So recognizing that a big piece of what our general fund pays for is the assessment and the tax collection and the pieces that Denise details out in this application. So again, if you want to know what it takes for our assessment department, that's separated out. Our tax collection, that's separated out. BOPTA, which is the Property Tax Board of Appeals, that is separated out. It's a really great breakdown of those expenses. So I encourage anyone who's curious, take a look.
And unfortunately, this is something that you and your department have to do every year. You've got to put the tax rolls together and put together this county assessment function funding assistance grant, and I realize it's a huge portion of your time, but we appreciate it. It's well worth the time, so we do appreciate everything you're doing. With that, I think we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of a grant application resolution to comply with ORS requirements for participation in the County Assessment Function Funding Assistance Grant, CAFA, for fiscal year 2022 to 2023.
Easy for you to say.
And I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Denise.
You all, thanks.
Item number 14, discussion and consideration of House Bill 4123 in the 2022 regular session. General Fund Grant Agreement number 107-2022-4123-7 with the Oregon Department of Administrative Services to establish a coordinated homeless response system in Tillamook County. And we're turning to Commissioner Aaron Scar. Commissioner.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a really exciting item for me, and I think for all of us, really. So during the legislative session, House Bill 4123 was passed, and it provides 8 counties across the state of Oregon with $1 million each. So Tillamook County receives $1 million to set up a coordinated homeless response system. So for Tillamook County, this is $1 million over 2 years. The requirements for us under this are that we bring together what would be considered a local continuum of care, which will be a guiding committee that will come under the commission, that will have a broad group of stakeholders, including local cities, law enforcement, churches, nonprofit organizations that provide services, community members, all those who are interested in putting together this coordinated homeless services system. So we'll bring together that group of people. We will work with a consultant to do a 5-year strategic plan for coordinated homeless services across the county, which will give us the opportunity to engage again with all of those partners, see exactly who's doing what currently, what do we have, what are the gaps that we need to fill in terms of these services, and how will we go about doing that in the next 5 years. So it's, again, just a great opportunity to do a broad look, create that plan, establish this, and hopefully be able to continue it far into the future. So Tillamook County will take a lead on this in partnership with CARE. TJ, who is the housing coordinator for the county, will be the county point person along with myself, and then of course Peter Starkey at CARE. And there are a variety of other partners that are likely to receive some stipends for their participation. $1 million sounds like a lot of money, and over 2 years it will still be a lot of money. The wonderful piece about this is that once we have completed our 5-year strategic plan and have that work ready to be implemented, any funds not yet spent can be used to implement that funding, or or to implement that project. So again, just a really great opportunity for us to respond to what we are seeing in terms of a growing number of people experiencing homelessness or right on the edge at risk of experiencing homelessness.
Great. Comments?
I think that's wonderful. It's exciting. I'm glad we can get some funding for it. We're certainly, everyone in Tillamook County has observed the rise in homelessness in the last couple of years. It used to be that there were homeless people in Tillamook County, but it was less apparent. They were living in the forest, and they were living under bridges, sadly, etc. And now we have folks on the street, and so the problem is growing. And I've had some people reach out and say, you know, where did these people come from, et cetera, and that question isn't easily answered. But it's happening everywhere. It's not just happening here. So I'm really glad that we have a path forward. There was a law passed by the state legislature that says that we can't move homeless people or houseless people off of public property unless we have an alternative place to suggest. You know, if we say you can't be here, we have to have a place to say where you can go. And so I'm really glad that we're working on that. To you know, it sort of feels like inventing the wheel because I don't think it's happening successfully. I haven't read about any place where it's happening successfully. So, you know, so we're all just building it. You know, we're figuring it out as we go, and I'm really grateful for Commissioner Scarr's work and leadership on that.
And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize Officer Troxel, or Lieutenant Troxel, I believe. He worked, I don't know, a year or more ago, we all had this conversation about how do we do this? How do we create this coordinated homeless response system? And he had done some work looking at other cities that were doing it, and we just couldn't bring it together without the funding. So the seed that he planted really has grown into what we have in front of us today. So I want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due, because he brought this conversation up and made sure that we were beginning these conversations, and I look forward to the City of Tillamook's partnership as well.
Yeah, this is a big deal. We're one of the few rural counties, I think, that has a housing commission already in place, and I'm glad to hear that the housing commission is going to be included in this. So 8 Oregon counties are receiving $1 million each. We're one of those 8. Can you give me a brief explanation on how those 8 were chosen?
So we applied.
Okay.
So this bill was really, the Association of Oregon Counties was integral in having this bill come forward. And so they put out the opportunity to all counties and said, if you are interested in one of these grants, please apply. Please let us know why you would be a good candidate at this time. And so we were one of 8 counties that were selected to move forward.
Perfect.
Yeah, it was we were ready. We've done some work leading up to this in the past year that placed us in a good position. Obviously, having TJ on board with the Housing Commission. So the Housing Commission will not take up this work specifically, but there will definitely be the linkage between the continuum of care around homeless services and the Housing Commission. But to be clear, they really look at we're looking at a spectrum of services, and they will be looking only and most significantly at housing, and they're looking at all types of housing. But there is a sort of where the homeless services continuum ends is where the housing service continuum picks up, so to speak.
And again, just another shining example of how Tillamook County, of all 36 Oregon counties, we lead the state in so many different ways. This is one of them. We're really taking this seriously, and that's a good thing. It is. Okay, so I think we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of House Bill 4123, 2022 regular session general fund grant agreement number 107-2022-4123-7 with the Oregon Department of Administrative Services to establish a coordinated homeless response system in Tillamook County.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you for that, Aaron, all your work on this. Item number 15, discussion and consideration of modification number 2 to personal services agreement number 4799 with Tillamook Motor Company for motor pool repair and maintenance services. Rachel Haggerty, Chief of Staff. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is a 2-year extension to our existing agreement with Tillman Motor Company for managing our fleet of vehicles. With this extension, we will have a 6-year contract with them in total. And so that will conclude what we were allowed to do through our RFP process for extensions. So the conclusion of this in April 2023, or prior to that, we will have at least another RFP just list the vendor to carry on these services at that time. So for your consideration.
Perfect, thank you. Comments, concerns?
No, I think it's great.
Great.
Thank you for your work on this, Rachel. Looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of modification number 2 to personal service agreement number 4799 with Tillamook Motor Company for the motor pool repair and maintenance services.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Rachel, you've got the next one also. Item number 16, discussion and consideration of amendment number 1 to number 6409, Tillamook County Transient Lodging Tax, TLT Tourism Related Facilities, Community Grant Program Grant Agreement number 2019-P-5 with Nestucca Valley Community Alliance. Rachel.
So as you know, we are incorporating the continued and completion development of the Nestucca Valley Community Alliance's master plan for their park on property that is leased by Tillamook Lightweight. And you awarded a grant to the Nestucca Valley Community Alliance to complete or further the development of that park back in 2019, the 2019 Transient Lodging Tax Grant Round, the amount of $74,700. The scope of work at that time was to further the construction of the utilities, sidewalks, etc. on the property. No funds have been spent to date, primarily because they have been furthering the collaboration and working with the Fauna Corridor project. And so as you heard during the Tillamook Coast presentation a couple of weeks ago when we presented this change in how the Nestucca Valley Community Alliance was proposing to implement the $74,700 approved by the TAC and presented by NAN was their approval of expending these funds on phase 2 of the skate park. So we loosely refer to the skate park as the entire property, but in fact, the skate park itself, the concrete structure, is only a portion of their master plan. And so part of that is completed, and they're ready to proceed with phase 2, and they have some other funding that they're securing. So they're proposing, and again approved by the TAC, to use the $74,700 to complete the skate park phase 2, which would not be in conflict at all with the Fauna Corridor project, and allows them to use the funds that you've already awarded with the same intent in mind.
Thank you.
So it's ready for consideration.
Perfect. Comments, questions?
I fully support this. Yeah, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. The skate park is awesome, and it's only partially complete. There's a dory boat in concrete. There's a wave. It's really. My son was a skater, and so I've been to a few skate parks, and this is by far the coolest skate park I've been to. And so I think the community really loves it, and visitors love it, and I'm fully supportive. I think it's a great investment of TLT funds.
Yeah, and I agree. And the Nestucca Valley Community Alliance is an amazing group of volunteers. I think that's the other piece that always strikes me when we talk about their work, is that they're an amazing group of volunteers that have put a lot of their blood, sweat, tears, time, energy, treasures, all of it into this. And so, I look forward to that being a completed skate park, and hopefully they can take a deep breath.
And maybe the county can too. I mean, they are great partners in the continuation of our Fauna Corridor project in Civic City. And again, we have so many partners. We had a meeting yesterday afternoon, as a matter of fact, in Civic City at the library. And we've got so many great partners and working on many things that the county does, but especially right now in Civic City and the Fauna Corridor project, things of that nature. And again, I explained at the meeting yesterday, the county cannot do this itself. We cannot. We need all these partners to do many of the things we do in the county. We've got the Creamery and PUD and Adventist Health, and the list goes on and on. But without the great partners that we have in Selma County, we can't get a lot of what we need to get done to complete. So that's all part of this work, and for NBCA, we appreciate your continuing cooperation with the county, especially in Pacific City on the Quanah Corridor project. So with that, I think we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of amendment number 1 to number 6409, Tillamook County Transient Lodging Tax Tourism Related Facilities Community Grant Program Grant Agreement number 2019-P-5 with Nestucca Valley Community Alliance.
And I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Rachel. Item number 17, discussion and consideration of an order in the matter of amending the fee schedule for on-site sanitation fees in the Department of Community Development. And with us this morning, we've got Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development. Good morning, Sarah.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. So I just brought my stuff up here, so you know I'm up here now for a little bit.
You're going to be here for a while.
Yes, so this is the home stretch. We are requesting your signature of the order to reflect the updates to the on-site sanitation fee schedule in the Department of Community Development. And the request is that these fees go into effect July 1st of 2022, and what we will continue to do between this time and that effective date is to make sure our local contractors, our sanitation installers, and others are aware of those fee changes so that they have adequate time in their budget and bid preparation to account for that increase where it is happening.
Comments, concerns?
No, we have talked about this before and looked over the existing fees, new fees. They seem reasonable. They haven't been, as Sarah said, they haven't been increased in some time, and so I think it's good.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement. We talked also about how we fall within other counties, and we are in the range. You know, we're not charging significantly higher or anything than what is the normal. We're just trying to really make sure these fees are assisting in covering the costs of the work that the county has to do, in this case related to when someone has a septic and they're doing their sanitation work. That's really what these are. And, you know, we have staff that have to go out and assure that that's all done properly, which I think we all want to have happen. Talking about, as we always do, our clean water here, and having proper sanitation is really important to that, and we have to cover those costs. So I'm in support.
Agreed. And again, our fee structure oftentimes is behind where they should be. People need to understand that the county's largest expense is personnel. And we cannot keep our personnel costs stagnant. We just can't. We try not to hire a lot of new people, but everyone deserves a raise. And that's especially true of county staff who work so hard, get so much done with limited resources, and we appreciate everything that goes on. Sarah, we appreciate you bringing this before us. Again, you've got the next couple of items. So I think with that, I think we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of an order in the matter of amending the fee schedule for on-site sanitation fees in the Department of Community Development.
And I would second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? And then we'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Aye.
passes. Oh, thank you.
Well, two of you could pass it without me, but I'm in favor as well.
Perfect. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item number 18, discussion and consideration of an order in the matter of amending the fee schedule for the Department of Community Development. Again, Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Chair Yamamoto. So also before you is an order that reflects the amendments proposed to the Planning Division fee schedule. This schedule also has not been revised or reviewed in several years. The cost of application review processes is going up, most notably a lot of our publication expenses. And so as with the on-site sanitation fee schedule, we would request signature of the order, implementation of the amended fee schedule July 1st. And again, we will use this time between now and then to notify local developers, the consultants that we work with, and others, so that they have time to prepare for these fee adjustments as well.
So again, these fee adjustments, should we pass this, will go into effect July 1st.
Yes, thank you. That's what the department is requesting. It gives us adequate time to make sure everyone's aware of those changes.
Comments, questions?
I'm wondering, the last time we talked about this in a public meeting, we talked about the oceanic cables. So, and those having a separate and higher fee for reasons that we could go into at length about how much it's cost the county for the last cable that came ashore in Tierra del Mar.
Yes, Commissioner Bell, you are correct, thank you. And that also stands true for communication towers. And so on the fee schedule, there is an additional line item. And I apologize that these pages are not numbered, but I believe it is on the second page at the bottom of the fee schedule. It's communication tower / transmission lines. And that would be the fee in addition to the conditional use fee for the review. So yes, we did account for that. Those fees are reflective of what I feel are appropriate based on our prior experiences and what it has cost the county to review those types of applications. That is what it actually costs us to do the work. So yes, that is in there.
Well, I'll just say that I think it's low for the transmission line for the transoceanic cable. I think it's low. It certainly cost us more than that for the one that came ashore in Tierra del Mar, and I would support separating out communication towers and transmission lines because they are different, and it's when we went through the whole process with the cable that came ashore in Tierra del Mar, it became apparent that Tillamook County was not reaping any financial benefit from those cables whatsoever, and in other places that they were at least generating some revenue, and so there was pushback from the community that we approved it because of the riches that were going to befall us from Facebook, which was in fact nothing. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that I think $2,500 is low for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Mel. I agree with you. I agree with you when you're talking about benefits and long-term contribution to the county. I have had this conversation with Terry Yamamoto. Not sure if that would be better suited for those long-term fees to be part of maybe Lightwave or some other utility or public service provider entity. I'm happy to go back and revise the fee because I do agree with you, and it is a tremendous amount of work. What I proposed is based on what I can account for time during the review process. But I'm certainly happy to go back and rework those figures if you would like me to.
So just to clarify, our fees are based on what we can document it takes us for a standard application, correct? And that's where I think this one gets tricky. We would have to decide whether we determine that the amount of time spent on the Tierra del Mar cable and all of the work that you had to do with that, is that what we would consider standard, application? Is that sort of a fair assessment of why it's $2,500, not $15,000? Okay.
Yes, and going back to Commissioner Mel's point about, long-term contributions and benefits to the county, I wholeheartedly agree. My challenge is with these fee schedules, I'm accountable for what it takes during that review process time.
And so we may have to look for, is there a different place where the county receives the financial benefit that we didn't in this one, but putting it in for this permit makes it tricky, because we could be challenged should we have one go through that doesn't have all of those pieces of difficulty to actually justify the time.
That is correct. And I am happy to continue that conversation, to provide input and feedback on, at least from the department standpoint, of what that experience has been. I'm just concerned, I don't know if I can, once the permit is issued, I'm just not sure what I can justify charging beyond that.
And I will say that the Facebook cable that came ashore at Terra del Mar was very odd. I mean, we bring in more cables than any other county in the state of Oregon, transoceanic cables. And that one did take on a life of its own. I think if you look at what's happened, what has occurred, if you go by that lot today, I mean, it's actually a beautiful lot now with the landscaping done and all. I think it's a beautiful lot. I think the community has really calmed down about that. Had we known about the issues that were going to come up, would we have handled it a little differently? That certainly is possible. And I'm not sure if county council can weigh in on the fact that, you know, can we look at this as a profit center by increasing fees or application fees? I'm just not sure that's possible. Should we be looking at this in terms of what it actually costs us on a normal basis for these fees?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joel Stevens, County Council. So yes, fees do need to be based on our expenses. So if the feeling is that this fee appears to be low, I think the direction to staff would be to go back and look at, you know, are there other costs associated with this that were maybe weren't considered or you know, that could be factored in to justify raising the fee. But fees do need to be based on our actual expenses. So I think it would just be a matter of if the board felt like that was the direction they wanted to go, you know, reassessing what can be associated.
So is it possible in the future, if we continue to look at this, I mean, I hate to hold up this fee schedule at this point. Can we adjust individual fees moving forward?
We don't see any problem with, you know, these fees are set by order, so the board could do another order that could adjust one of the fees. And, you know, as Ms. Absher's mentioned, you know, typically with these orders, you want to provide some period before it goes into effect to notify. But this change potentially in the future would only impact a very small group of potential developers. So that's probably less of an issue than like the notice requirements with this particular order.
So Commissioner Bell, are you good with that? We'll continue to look at the Trans-Pacific Ocean fees, but we need to get this one on the books for July 1st increase.
Well, I would be good with that with some assurance that we're going to do it. I wouldn't be good with that if we're approving this today and then we don't get back to it.
Again, I don't think we can just say that we're going to approve this today, but we will increase the Trans-Pacific Ocean fees at a later date. I think we need to look at all costs involved, as County Council Stevens points out, that, you know, these fees really have to be based on what it costs the county. And again, I realize that the Facebook cable that came across, that was kind of a one-off. Again, we've brought in a lot of cables over the years and not had issues like we had with the Facebook cable. So, again, I would think that we would continue to look at this and possibly adjust fees in the future if we felt that was adequate. But I don't think we can say we're going to approve this today with a fee increase coming in the future until we actually run the numbers.
Of course. But what I'm getting at is not that we would promise to increase it in the future, but that we would actually go through the process of reassessing.
Good with that?
Absolutely.
Good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Joe, good with that?
I agree.
And also to separate out the
Communication
what do we call
tower.
them? Yeah, communication tower and the transmission line.
Yes.
Because, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of an order in the matter of amending the fee schedule for the Department of Community Development.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you, Sarah. You've got A couple more, actually. This is going to be an interesting conversation. Item number 19, status of short-term vacation rentals in the unincorporated areas of Tillamook County. Again, Sarah Apsher, Director of Community Development. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Yellen. Good morning, Commissioners. Isabel, may I please have share ability? I'd like to present for you and share with you this morning some updates. I have a slide deck that identifies the number of rentals in many of our unincorporated communities. This is a presentation that I've shared with the Housing Commission, the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee, and others. So I feel like it's timely to share that with the county commissioners, given the level of interest and concern that we have all been continuously receiving that also appear to be accelerating in regards to capacity concerns in communities. With that, I also have some updates for you on the work of the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee, just to give you a status update on that. Couple of things to start. First, I always forget to thank people after I start my presentation, so I'd like to thank Wendy Sheik for helping me put the maps together that I'm going to be sharing with all of you, and also for Commissioner Scar for her help with co-facilitation of conversations with the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee. With that, part of what also has brought this conversation to the table, as you are aware, Manzanita Mayor Mike Scott sent us all an email early April to let the county know that the City Council had passed a resolution to suspend issuance of new short-term rental permits. And they did that. Some of their residential zones currently have a 17.5% cap. He stated that they will reissue licenses as they are turned in, but will not add any new licenses as the housing inventory increases. And I think that is largely in part because what we are all experiencing is a lot of residential construction with the intent of converting those houses into short-term rental properties.
So I want to go over that in a little more detail. We've had extensive conversations with Mayor Scott, and his concern is not increasing the cap, but what they're finding is that they have more and more vacation rentals in Manzanita simply because of the increasing number of homes being built. I think we've seen this during the pandemic. Homes are just not available on the coast, especially in the coastal communities. And so, but people still want to move here, so they're buying lots or they own lots, and they've decided now that they're going to build. So every home built doesn't increase the percentage cap that they have in Manzanita, but it does increase the number of short-term rentals that they have in the city. So they're taking a step back. They want to make sure that there is a lot of angst in all of our communities today because of short-term rentals, good or bad, and they're good, and they are at times problematical at the same time. So in order to keep the peace, if you will, in Manzanita, they're taking a step back to look at exactly what they want in their community, which I think is fine. So I'm not sure where we're going with this conversation, but I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll just turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chairman. And yes, I agree. I think today is the start of a conversation that our communities are requesting from the county commissioners. So the data and information in this presentation is collected through 2021. I will give you an update on what we are seeing in 2022. Some of these numbers have fluctuated slightly, and I will point out where those are. So in 2018, this was the first time we took a deep dive into really understanding what the number and percentage of residential properties with short-term rental permits were in unincorporated communities. This was part of the work of the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee in 2018 with that presentation provided to the board in December of 2018. There were 4 communities identified for part of that study. They included Oceanside, Netarts, Pacific City Woods, and Nesperman. And Isabel, I've added a couple more slides to this. I will provide you with the updated slide deck so that you can post that for public review. In 2021, we expanded the scope, largely based on community concerns we've started receiving since 2018, or more community concerns that started surfacing after 2018. The scope of the study was expanded to include Neocani, Barview, Twin Rocks, Watsiko, and Cape Mears. So these maps were generated in partnership with Wendy Sheen in the assessor's office. The orange highlighted properties are those properties that have short-term rental permits. This does not indicate the level of activity. I think it's important to note that some properties rent more frequently than others. As we discovered through the conversations of the short-term rental operator license fee, some folks don't rent very much. Others, it's their primary purpose of the property. So these numbers are current. So Neocani, roughly 18% of the dwelling units in the community of Neocani have short-term rental permits. In working with Wendy, this was identified. We pulled all residential properties that had an assessed value greater than $50,000 because we didn't want to pull in properties that maybe just had a tread or something else on them, and so we used 50,000 as our baseline. So in total, we identified 385 residential properties, and of those, 69 had permits. Barview, Twin Rocks, Watsiko, again, the orange highlighted properties are those properties that have short-term rental permits. In Barview, Twin Rocks, Watsiko, following the same methodology, there are 234 residential properties. Roughly of those, 37 of them have short-term rental permits, which brings their community percentage to roughly 16%.
So, can I stop? So the numbers you're using, I understand the number of short-term rentals. The residential improvements valued over $50,000. That does not include the land value, correct?
That is correct, Commissioner. It is
So these
only
are
structure.
improved properties, they're not vacant lots. These are improved properties that have a dwelling on them.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we use that threshold because anything less than that is most likely not being used as a dwelling,
Okay.
given construction costs and just values of homes.
Thank you.
In Oceanside, we identified roughly 672 properties. Within Oceanside, there are, now this number has changed a little bit. At the time of the study, there were 109 short-term rental permits. After further review, we're at about 123 for the community of Oceanside, which is going to bump them up to roughly 17%. One of the things that is important to note, and I'll start with the Oceanside, really looking at where those properties are highlighted as having permits, you can see that the concentration of those permits are properties that are within the village of Oceanside, where they have close access to the beach or some sort of scenic value to them. And that will be a recurring theme as we move further down the coast. So one thing, I mean, to the community's point, in fairness, you know, when we talk about the percentage, you know, the residents within the village area themselves, the capacity concerns are probably amplified because the majority of those permits are within that village area, which is a very highly density developed area. NETARS is hovering right around 12%. We identified roughly 609 properties, and of those, 75 have short-term rental permits. And again, you can see from the map, the majority of those permits are located in areas with close access to the beach or that have some sort of scenic value to them. Cape Mears, so the community of Cape Mears came in the study at roughly 13%. They have roughly 27 short-term rental permits issued. I say roughly because since the study was done, they may have dropped some, they may have added some, but I think that this is a good median baseline that is still relevant today. So as you can see, the majority of those, again, are closer to the ocean with access or scenic value. Woods is our community with our highest number of short-term rental permits issued for properties. This number has most likely increased to 23%. They have added some, and I will go through that towards the end of my presentation. So as you can see, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide so that you can see I've broken down the community. There you go. Wanted to, because Pacific City covers a wide area, and putting it on a slide, I wanted to separate the community in two images. This is at the Pacific Avenue Bridge. And so there's the north half of the community on your left-hand side and the southern half of the community on your right-hand side. So again, in comparison of the two, the number of properties with permits are largely concentrated west of the Nestucca River, between the river and the ocean, Cape Kironda and Bobstraw Park. If you look on the east side of the river, you definitely see some separation in where those permit holders are located. So I'll just stop there for a moment so you can take a look. There's a lot of orange on that screen. Okay. Neskowin. So Neskowin is one of those communities. Since this study, I would say they are probably now hovering at 17%. And again, you can see that largely the share of permitted properties are west of Highway 101. They are primarily located in the South Beach area and the village. And these are areas with easy access to the beach and have scenic value to them.
So Sarah, and I don't know if you can do this, but can you add to these slides the number of undeveloped lots so that we know what the potential, I mean, like what's happening in Manzanita currently. There's a building frenzy going on there, and that is occurring on undeveloped lots. That could give us a little more insight as to what the potential might be. And again, I don't know if you have that type of information.
So actually, that's a great question and comment. We actually do. We are working on 2 additional layers for part of this tracking process that actually extend out to other projects we are working on. So one would be the number of undevelopable lots. Is important information for the Housing Commission, and especially as we move forward with our housing efforts. Secondly, we are also putting together a layer to identify of all of the properties in our communities, how many of them are owned by second homeowners. And that serves multiple purposes. It helps us with the short-term rental program. It helps us with our housing efforts and future projects, and it ties into emergency preparedness efforts. So those are all long-range planning projects. And what's great is all of this information can be shared for many, many projects and many objectives. So it's coming. It's just the undeveloped lots is the easy part. There's going to have to be some ground truthing for the second homeowners. So I hope to be back with all of that information by the end of the year as part of our presentation for code amendments and other projects.
Perfect. Thank you.
So in 2018, here were the numbers that we came up with for short-term rentals per the 4 unincorporated communities that were part of that initial study. You can see that Oceanside back in 2018 hovered around 13%. Netarts was at 10, Pacific City was at 18, and Neskowin was at 12. The number of improved properties and the number of rentals, those are both a bit dynamic. People adjust property lines, they create new parcels, they consolidate parcels. We have properties with rebuilds and tear downs. So just keeping that in mind when we're looking at all of these numbers, but this is as close as we can get to a very dynamic environment of putting together some solid numbers for you. The number of short-term rental permits is accurate and is an accurate snapshot within that time frame. So in comparison of 2018 to 2021, So, because unfortunately we didn't include those other communities in that initial study, I can only sample by what we had between 2018 and 2021 then and now for the 4 communities that we started with. But we will continue to track those numbers for all of these communities moving forward so that we can continue to see the differences.
Can you add percent increase to that slide as well going forward?
Absolutely.
Because I just did it really quickly and it looks like we're running at roughly 4% to 5% in the communities that we had in 2018 and 2019. I think that's an important number that gives us, hard numbers are good, percent is also.
Absolutely, yes, we'd be happy to do that. So this is an interesting slide. So this is something that we can generate from our program software for the short-term rental program and the TLT program. So what we wanted to look at when we were doing this study was also level of rental activity, right? Because again, you have permit holders, but what does that really mean as far as advertising your rentals, right? Because part of this, when we're talking about capacity and visitors to our area, what does that mean? And so this was our best attempt to figure that out. And so what this shows is, so the green line is the number of rental units, and that is countywide. So that does include the cities, because they pulled everything. But the orange line is the line that's interesting. This identifies rental activity. So when we look at all of those platforms that we use as part of our code enforcement program and look for other information, they track the number of rental listings. And so what we know, what's interesting is if you see where that big dip is, that's March of 2020. So that's when transient lodging activities were stopped for that period of time when the pandemic hit Tillamook County strongly, and the commissioners took action to stop transient lodging activities. So that big dip is March of 2020. This graph extends to the end of August 2021. What's interesting about this graph is that the rental advertising activities have not gone back up to where they were prior to March 2020. What is also interesting is that we had a record year for TLT collection at $7.1 million. 2/3 of that is generated from short-term rentals. So what we think has happened is there are fewer listings, fewer advertisements, but those that are renting are either renting more often or they're charging more. So we have to account as the advertising went down and the TLT revenue went up, how to explain that gap. And that's our best assessment. Yes, Commissioner Dodd.
Visit Tillamook Coast has also added they're staying longer.
Exactly.
Because people were working remotely and their kids are going to school remotely, you have one ad, but they're staying considerably longer.
Absolutely, yes. And Nan and Julie and I actually had a conversation with vacation rental management company managers about this graph. And that was, yes, thank you. That was our assessment from professionals in the field and what we saw internally with the county. What is interesting is, and we can't pull it out as much as we'd like to in detail, but the number of rental units, you can see, it kind of dips up and dips down. Part of what's hard to track is the permitting numbers are dynamic. We close as many permits as we issue, we transfer permits, so it's always, every day it's a different number. And then to further this, so this is, sorry for the brightness, this is a graph that we pulled this morning so you could see. And it shows, again, the activity levels through to January of 2022. So we've got listings and then the number of units. But what you can see at the end there of the green line is that slight increase. and this is on a scale from 1,000 to 2,000, so, it is rising. So I can tell you, quickly before I move into the short-term rental
And
activities.
I want to ask a question about
Yes.
that. So, just for clarity, when you say short-term rental listings, one property may have 3 or 4 listings in different services. Is that why there's that gap between the number of units and the number of listings, as opposed to units that are listed that are not licensed? Because I think I could read that either way. Can you
Sure.
clarify?
I would be happy to. So the purple line represents, you're correct, it can be multiple listings, or it can be a single listing of a rental unit. We have a lot of companies also that are not going out to platforms for advertising like they used to, because they don't need to. And in our partnership with Visit Tillamook Coast, they've actually created a page to access local rental companies for listings. So some of our companies are actually transitioning and pivoting to moving away from some of these online platforms. But there could be a home that's on VRBO, Airbnb, et cetera, and that's what does account for that higher number.
Okay, it was important to
Yeah.
clarify that it doesn't mean that there are nearly 4,000 units out there, but only 1,500 of them have permits. So I think that's what I wanted to
Yes.
make sure we were clear, that those listings are related specifically to the units that we're seeing rented in the green line. We are, because I know there is concern in the community for people who may not be aware of the system that we do have to continually scour the internet for listings in our county to be sure they have permits. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a misconception, because that was my first thought was, oh my gosh, with all those listings and only 1,500 of them, so.
Thank you. I appreciate you helping with that clarification and pointing that out.
So
Yes.
Sarah, I've got a question also. So we're still using STR Helper?
Yes, which has turned into post compliance. So that company has been merged and evolved, but yes. And that is money well spent. As you know, that helps keep us at a very high compliance rate.
So I'm just concerned, you mentioned, there are new ways that people are listing their home or private website. I don't know. We're able to keep track of those also, correct? We're not losing ground to unlicensed short-term rentals.
Thank you, Commissioner. No, we are not.
Okay.
And we feel very confident in our program and its abilities to help us identify properties that are advertising to rent that do not have permits.
Thank you.
So where does this leave us before I jump into the short-term rental advisory committee work? So to date, we do have, as you know, over 1,000 active short-term rental properties within unincorporated Tillamook County. What I think is important to note that in 2021, for the calendar year, we issued 105 new permits. So it was a busy year. By the end of April last year, we had issued 29 new permits. So of those 105, 29 were issued by the end of April. To date, we have received 59 applications for year 2022. So it has doubled from what we saw during this time last year. In my conversations with staff, and I think this is relevant to share, the majority of the permits issued or applied for since the beginning of 2022 are in South County, and many of the conversations with staff are to make sure that a permit can be issued, because people are telling us that they have decided to look in South Tillamook County or Tillamook County because Lincoln County is no longer issuing permits. So we have not tracked the number of times we have been told that or asked about that, but anecdotally, I can confirm that part of this spike is attributed to the fact that Lincoln County is no longer issuing permits and people are looking for other areas.
So, and I'm not exactly clear, so issuance of permits in Lincoln County, does that include the cities, like Lincoln City? They're also not issuing new permits, is that what I'm hearing?
You know, that's a great question. I don't know what the city is doing, but as a result of the ballot measure that passed in Lincoln County, yep, people that we receive those requests and those inquiries. I myself have received several of those personally. That seems to be a common question now folded into buyers' questions when they contact the department and they're interested in purchasing a piece of property, or prior to a realtor listing a piece of property that has now become part of their standard list of questions for our staff.
That ballot measure that was passed in Lincoln County, that is currently still tied up in court. That's the reason they're no longer issuing permits, because of that ballot measure that's now in court.
That is my understanding.
Thank you.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee. So this is a first quarter update. Commissioner Scar and I have facilitated and led the committee in their work since they reconvened. As you know, this is a rather large committee. We expanded it. It's been great representation from all areas of the county, and we've had some wonderful conversations to kick off their work. So committee discussions, what we've focused on as we've reformed the committee and prepared to start our work with audit of Ordinance 84 in the program, which started this last month. We've identified committee goals, community interests, and self-interests. We really want to make sure that this is a collaborative process, that all interests, both of those of members, the communities they represent, the industries that they represent, that we are being comprehensive in bringing all of those interests and concerns to the table as part of our work.
Quick question. So the self-interests are those that own the rentals, and management companies that manage the rentals, and realtors that sell homes to become rentals. I'm not exactly sure that self-interest group.
Sure.
Who is that?
So that is the committee members. So it is comprised.
The committee members.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
They did the work to determine through a process what they felt were their self-interests, as well as what they felt were the community interests they represented. So it was really a conversation for everyone in the room to become very familiar with, one, why am I here as an individual, and two, why are the people around me here, and what voices are represented.
Perfect. Thank you. That clarifies that. Thank you.
And so here were the top interests of committee members. And so those included livability, public safety, economic factors, specifically economic contributions to our county and communities by short-term rentals, regulations, community relationships, and property rights. Many of those interests, they overlap, as we found through the discussions and identifying those interests. Most notably, enforcement, regulation, and public safety, economics, tourism, and housing, and then the quality of experience in communities and community relationships. So when we took all of those interests that were expressed and explored, it's really were the three categories that they all fell into, with a lot of overlap. One, there's definitely a relationship of one of those interests with another. There's a cause and effect. When we talked about community interests, so we spent a lot of time talking about, moving from what their interests were and what their desires were to talking about making sure that we were fully understanding what the interests were and the desires of those they represent on the committee. And so again, we ended up with the same interest, which was good. So it was good to see committee members acknowledge and recognize community member interests and the importance of making sure that these areas were our areas of focus when we look at the ordinance and the program. And I have a presentation on the website for the short-term rental committee that has the full assessment of that process. I just wanted to pull out a couple of slides that I thought were relevant. But largely, and where I think this conversation today circles back to when we talk about the percentage of rentals, when we talk about community concerns, etc., is the livability component of this program and of our work. So these were the top 6 interests that were associated with concerns or desires to promote or enhance livability within communities. And they were largely better enforcement of regulations, program consistency, fair and reasonable rules, community participation in rulemaking, so that would be their participation, a more engaged level of participation in updates to Ordinance 84, which governs short-term rentals. Likewise, the short-term rental owners would also like an opportunity to be more engaged. And then lastly, establish limits on numbers of short-term rentals in communities, which gets us back to the conversation of a cap that we previously explored in 2018. And as you can see from the numbers shared earlier in this presentation, the number of rentals in each of our communities we know is growing. So in looking at all of these interests and putting them all together to rank or to figure out what was the most important, this was the percentage based on all of those interests, both community interests, self-interest, etc. The top priority or the most important interest is community livability. Enforcement came in second. Safety was ranked at 15% of those interests, and then right behind that, I believe at 12 or 13% was economic value.
So these top three represent 88% of the interest, is that
Correct, yes. And then economic development is the fourth, which makes up that remainder.
And again, these are of your committee members?
Correct.
Okay.
So when the committee is talking about what is our purpose, what do we want to achieve, what do we want to accomplish when we're looking at Ordinance 84, when we're looking at regulations, when we're talking about what's important to the community, the consensus was community livability is the top priority. So going back to the conversation today, and why I was asked to be here to visit with you. One, it was a good idea to give you an update on all the work that's going on and happening. But two, there has been a call to action, a request for call to action by communities, largely in requesting that the commissioners implement some sort of immediate action in response to the growth of rentals in communities, especially because, not only because of the growth we've seen, but also because it is going to take us a while to finish our work with the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee. We're looking probably at hoping to wrap up that work and bring a series of proposed amendments back to the commissioners at the end of the year, so December 2022. And so what we have heard is following means Anita's action would be that the commissioners request or consider a pause in issuance of new short-term rental permits. This would not impact anyone that has a permit and is renting. This would just be a pause in the issuance of permits until the short-term rental committee work is done, where we look at whether or not we need to establish caps, etc. I've talked to a couple of local realtors, and they are aware of this conversation. They're aware of this information that I've shared with you today. We do recognize that an action by the board could have consequences to the real estate community, the pending sales, buyers who are in the process of obtaining financing. Some of their financing is reliant upon the ability to obtain a short-term rental permit for that income. The real estate community representatives that I visited with understand why this conversation is taking place. They recognize the growth. They too have heard of people coming and looking at Tillamook County because of the limitations in Lincoln County or the non-existent opportunities for a permit. They would have some requests as far as honoring permits that are received during the pause, just not issuing them. But if this is an action the board would take, then also that I'd be able to provide some sort of letter or documentation for buyers that could be shared with their loan financing institutions to let them know that their permit would be honored. We just would not issue any permits so that anyone else could actively rent between now and the end of the year.
You just lost me with that.
I'm so sorry, I was worried about that. So, what the request would be is that if a pause is instated, so I'm not talking about a moratorium, it's a very different process, just a pause on issuance of new short-term rental permits only. That we would continue to receive those permit applications during the pause. We just would not issue any new permits until the pause was lifted. And in the meantime, to support realtors and prospective buyers, that we would provide something in writing that reassures them that they can apply for a permit during this period of pause. We just will not issue the permit, so they cannot rent until after that pause is lifted. And by that time, it would give Commissioner Scar and I an opportunity to work with the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee, bring a series of amendments and proposals to you. If those include recommendations for community caps, that would all be factored into it. But essentially, this is pumping the brakes, allowing these real estate processes and transactions to continue and to finish. But we just wouldn't issue any new permits until after that pause was lifted and the committee work was done.
So the part that confuses me about that is are you suggesting that we would commit in writing that at the end of the pause that we would issue those permits because it's related to financing? So what if we didn't though? What if at the end of the pause we issue a moratorium?
Or choose a cap that doesn't include that many, then what happens?
Right, so, we discussed that as well. So the moratorium, I think if we did allow people to still submit a permit during the pause, we would ultimately have to honor those. With respect to, a cap, the best that I could assess through that is that we would establish those caps, and in some communities we may have a surplus, but what that means is we would not issue any new permits until that percentage was dropped back down. So we would recognize that there may be communities with an overage, which based on some of these numbers, we may establish caps already that are below what we have permitted in some of these communities. And I'll use Pacific City as an example. If the national average for a cap is 17 to 20%, they're already at 23. So we're going to be there anyway. It's just a question of, and again, this is just an initial conversation. I've been asked to visit with you about these things and holding in the conversations with the real estate community representatives. Just a lot to think about today for sure.
And I appreciate you having those conversations, Sarah. Sarah and I've had a number of conversations about, is this the time to press pause based on what we are hearing from the community, based on what has happened in Lincoln County. I believe that Clatsop County also is having some changes with their regulations. I know I've received calls from a couple of realtors specifically asking me, referencing, well, we know that they're slowing it down in Clatsop, are you? So they're definitely, we are coming into focus for purchases at this time. And I think it's a really good time for us to consider how we maintain our livability as our community is desiring, and those we're talking or hearing from are desiring. On the other side, the idea of unexpectedly shutting down this program when our real estate agents are heading into what is commonly a busy season for them is disconcerting to the economics in our community as well. Similarly with our contractors heading into their busy season, has impacts that we have to be mindful of. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with saying if you apply, we guarantee that at the end of the pause everybody gets one. I think that would still have to be an awareness that at the end of the pause, depending on what decisions were made, that permits would be issued as available in line with what regulations roll out of the pause. So I think I feel comfortable somewhere in that area more than we guarantee if you apply during the pause, we're going to give you one. And I realize there's a lot more work, a lot more conversation for us to have as commissioners. And I just have to say, there was a time when I said, I was not in support of capping short-term rentals. I was really in support of building the other side of our real estate market. That I felt like short-term rentals don't have a direct line to affordable housing, and I still question if they have a direct line to affordable housing. But with the amount of work that we've done and the very limited amount of development we've been able to encourage on the other side, I have to say I have to rethink my previous statements. So I realize in politics I'll be called a flip-flop, but I have to rethink my previous statements because I have long said that the importance is building the other side, and I still believe that. But with the challenges currently in place to building the other side, and with what is happening in terms of the balance in our county of second homes, vacation homes, to permanent full-time homes, when I first started this housing work in 2015, 44% of tax statements were heading out of the county to what we presumed at that point were second home owners that were not full-time residents here. This year it was 50%. That's 6% change, and we know that we're not gonna change the second homeowners specifically, but there is a percentage of that is short-term rental that makes it possible for those folks to have second homes and to not be here. And a percentage of those that are not even second homes, they are purely vacation rentals for someone who's turning it as a business. So I think those are all things that we'd like to be able to look at during the pause to determine how can we best meet that livability goal with very, very thoughtful changes to our program that will ideally encourage much of what we heard, which is not businesses that are turning and churning second homes, but rather true second homeowners that ultimately become so many of our primary folks who live here. They buy it later in their life and they rent it part of the time and use it part of the time with the intention of moving here full-time when they retire. You know, we all agree that so many of those folks are pillars in our community when they come here. And that's, you know, that supports livability in a lot of ways. So it's just a lot to think about. And Sarah, I appreciate you bringing the conversation forward at this point.
So to me, this becomes very complex, very serious.
Yes.
These are serious decisions you're not asking us to make that decision today, but in the near future, I think you're gonna be coming back to us. So there are things that are gonna have to happen with the short-term rental regulations moving forward, in order for me to be comfortable with this. So first of all, I can see if indeed we put a pause on short-term rental permits, until, the end of the year or something like that? But allow people to continue to apply for a permit and guarantee that if their home meets all the requirements of a short-term rental, that we would issue that permit, especially in a couple of communities. And Joel, I'm gonna have to ask you for some guidance here because I live in one of those communities that I have a problem with. That's Pacific City, of course. They're currently almost 23%. And if we apply caps, this is a big if.
Yeah.
If we apply caps, one of those caps is gonna have to be on Pacific City, possibly one on Neocani, because they're already at 18%. So we're gonna have to be very careful in saying that if you apply between now and the end of the year, if your home meets the standards, we will indeed issue that permit once this pause is lifted. And I'm not sure we can say this. So let's take another example. If a home is someone buys a lot and their home is under construction, am I correct in that they cannot apply for a short-term rental permit until that home is completed and we are able to inspect it for our short-term rental needs? That would be correct.
That's our standard process right now, yes.
Yes.
That gives me some relief there. I'm not sure that I am comfortable, especially with Pacific City at 23% currently, whether we can guarantee that anyone that applies for a permit between the time we were to invoke a pause to the end of the year, that we can guarantee them that that permit would be issued, if again, their home meets the standards. There is a way, I think maybe we can get past that, is if we change the short-term rental regulations where permits are no longer transferable or run with the home. That over time can bring that 23 now, maybe 24%, 25%. Over time, that could allow us to get back to whatever rate we want. Is that something that we could do?
That's something that we can definitely look at.
Put in the regulations, in the new regulations that we're proposing.
Yeah, I would want to look at that in more detail and discuss it with staff as far as how we could implement that before I said for sure, but that's definitely something we can have further conversations.
I would like an answer to that before this is brought back to us for some sort of a decision. And I think, and again, I have major concerns about Pacific City, and again, I live there. This is full disclosure, I live in Pacific City. So this is something that I need to disclose. Neocani is also very close. Oceanside is also very close. And again, I have no idea if we're gonna involve caps, and if we do, where those caps are gonna be. So caps on communities, it would not be a single cap for the county in communities. Each individual community could have, if indeed we work that way, each individual community can have their own cap.
So, thank you, Chair Yamamoto, Sarah Absher, for the record. My recommendation would be that through the work of the committee, that we propose a cap percentage for each community. The methodology, my request would be the methodology for establishing the cap and issuing permits would be the same. Meaning, my preference would be we not do a lottery for one community and a wait in line until it's your turn for a different community, that it would be the same, the percentage for each community could be different, but that the methodology behind that cap and permit issuance would be the same. I would prefer that over a county-wide cap. I think that caps by community help us better address community concerns and needs and the unique characteristics of each of our communities. Because even from the slides, you can see they're all very, very different. Their recreational needs are different. Their amenities, vary. All of them have ocean views. They're all coastal communities, but Pacific City is unique in that it has two very highly sought after recreational amenities. Oceanside has the Stateway side. Cape Mears has a beach that perhaps isn't part of a, regularly advertised promotional plan, but they are close to the spit. So, I think that's something we would have to talk about and get community input for.
Something else that I'm very concerned about is exactly the situation that Manzanita is going through. They still have that 17.5% cap, but the numbers are growing in Manzanita simply because the number of homes being built in Manzanita are growing. And many people are building new homes in order to be a vacation rental. So that's something else that the short-term rental committee is gonna have to take into account as we move forward. Is a cap appropriate? Is there a set number? I don't know. I appreciate very much everything that the short-term rental committee has done to date. They have done some terrific work in trying to make sure that our communities remain livable, more livable than they were, and they've done great work. Unfortunately, I see some other big work that needs to be done here. That's just off the top of my head right now what I'm thinking. So,
I support Commissioner Scar's suggestion that if we move forward with the pause, that we don't guarantee that everyone who applies during the pause will receive a permit, but rather that whatever recommendations the short-term rental committee comes up with, if that fits with issuing new permits, then those people would be at the top of the list.
Sure.
So I certainly support that idea. This conversation is, I'm certainly getting a lot of calls about short-term rentals, and we have been for a while, and those have escalated since the ballot measure was passed in Lincoln County, and also more recently in I've gotten more calls from the community in North County because of the change in Clatsop County. And so people are concerned, does this mean you're gonna shut down short-term rentals in Tillamook County? And so what I'm thinking about is that when we started this whole conversation about destination management, about Visit Tillamook Coast in 2014, about tourism in Tillamook County, there very, very clearly the community said loud and clear, we don't want to be Lincoln City, we don't want to be Seaside. We don't want to be what our neighbors to the north and south are in terms of tourism. And so it reminds me that I was in all those meetings, I heard those things, I said those things. That's not what we want for ourselves. And so what I'm thinking in the context of this conversation is that those communities to the north and south of us have reached their saturation point. They're fed up, they're done, they've cut it off, and maybe hastily, and now they're going to be stuck in court. But I think I come back to, we don't want to be that. We don't want to get to the point that they're at now, where they're fed up and they're taking extreme action. We want to take action before that. And I think it's extremely timely because, as you pointed out, folks from both of those areas are going to come here because they're now cut off to the north and south for new short-term rentals. That's going to increase the people who are coming here wanting short-term rentals. And I have nothing against short-term rentals, of course. You know, I have close personal friends who are of retirement age. They have a short-term rental. It supplements their income. Like Commissioner Yamamoto said, people buy a second home and they retire here, and they're vital to our community. So I'm not saying I have anything against short-term rentals. I'm saying that I want us to take action on this before it gets out of hand and we have become what we said we didn't want to be.
And I need to add a little bit to that, because I still visit with vacation rental management company managers. So as you know, we met regularly during the pandemic. We continue to meet, not as frequently, but we check in with each other, and you know, they recognize the concerns about saturation. They recognize the concerns about overcapacity. The Tillamook County Visitors Association is part of these conversations. You know, part of what we're trying to do too is separate capacity and saturation between who's visiting for just the day and who's staying in a rental, because there's a lot of things that are attributing to those oversaturation and overconcentration concerns and frustrations that our communities are feeling. But you know, they too share that goal and that vision of, you know, the livability components, and you know, their primary objectives too are making sure that they're educating their guests and communicating their guests about conduct expectations. We launched the Hello Neighbor program in partnership with Tillamook County Visitors Association. We're getting ready to refresh that. We want to get that back out to the communities and to our rentals. You know, the other thing is they too are concerned even about the protection of natural resources. We have all of these amazing natural resource amenities that are literally being loved to death. And so they want to do their part in helping to protect and preserve those natural resource amenities that we have in Tillamook County that we all value. And the third piece of that is emergency preparedness, especially when the reality is if we have a disaster, big or small, at any time, they are an integral partner in preparedness and recovery, because it's their guests that are going to be here. So I think that, you know, one of the best things about this process through the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee is everyone is committed to all of those things, making sure we don't end up, you know, like our neighbors to the north and south. And I think that's also why that livability priority came out at the top. So the good news is that everybody shares that interest and that desire. I think it's just how are we going to get there? And in the meantime, is it a good idea to pump the brakes on the program so that we can all take a step back and reevaluate and come up with some thoughtful revisions?
I think we need to be careful in one area. There are definitely property rights issues here that we need to be very careful of. At the same time, to put a pause into place and possibly disrupt negotiations that are currently happening with property purchasing. If people are looking and they're in the process of purchasing a home in one of our coastal communities, and their intent is indeed as a short-term rental, I'm not sure that a pause on our part with no guarantee that they're going to be able to make that a rental at the end of this year, I am a little concerned for the county. And Joel, I think you need to think long and hard about that aspect of it too before we make a decision here. Property rights issues are something that are extremely important here. At the same time, we've been hearing from the residents here loud and clear that livability is the number one issue. So there's a balancing act here, livability versus property rights issues, especially during the next 8 or 9 months, if indeed we were to impose some sort of a pause. But again, we need to look at the numbers. The short-term rental committee has their work cut out for them.
Yes,
They do. There are a lot of issues that need to be considered, especially if we determine that property rights issues are possibly going to put the county in jeopardy. If indeed we exceed whatever caps, if indeed we put a cap in place, we need to put in place ways that over time that cap will be lowered, and at that point, no further short-term rental permits are issued until the number gets down to below a certain cap level, something like that. That's another way, again, that I think maybe we need to consider that at the same time. Keep the county out of jeopardy. So, there's a lot that needs to be considered here. So I think you've heard from the commissioners.
Yeah, and I would suggest that should we choose a pause, that just as we have decided sitting here today that our fees will go up in July, which gives contractors, builders, and folks who are looking at that time to adjust. I think similarly, if we decided on a pause, that it would not be starting tomorrow, but rather we would need to offer a window that allows for transactions that are currently underway to reach completion, so that we don't have someone who has signed an agreement on their property to purchase or sell that suddenly falls into a jeopardy position. So I think there is definitely an awareness that we have to have of how are we interacting with transactions that are underway. So I don't know the answer to what that is, other than there has to be an awareness of that. I would look forward to a conversation with the answers to all of these questions we've brought forward around the legality of what we can and cannot do without putting the county in jeopardy, because obviously we are the county's ultimate risk managers, and we have to have that in our conversation. And with that as one of the variables, what are our options? And what would the suggestion be from the Department of Legal Counsel in concert?
Mr. Counsel, we have a hand up in the back. Are we taking public comment at this point? Can we?
Jerry is a member of the short-term rental committee, if that makes any difference in that. I don't know if Sarah had asked him to be here possibly as part of the presentation, or if he's just one of those pillars of our community.
This is just an open conversation.
It is, Mr. Chair. I mean,
So
normally you don't take public comment.
So if we allow Jerry to comment, then we would have to ask any others in the room and anyone online to comment.
If you're going to allow public comment, then yes, I would recommend opening it up.
Mr. Keene, I do apologize, but we will be taking this up again. I'm not sure when, maybe in a couple of weeks. So your public comments would be very welcome then. Is that okay? Sure. Thank you, I appreciate that, I do. Okay, anything else?
When would you like us back?
Um,
12 weeks, we can work with Isabel.
We can do it in 2 weeks, the 11th. So I'm gonna be gone next week, although I'll be attending virtually, but I would prefer to be here for this conversation.
So I believe that the budget,
Yep.
presentations and messages from the county treasurer, I will be asking for a continuation of the hazard, planning process, just a quick, bit of time on the 11th, so I'm not sure if there would be adequate time or if the board wants to make time.
We can discuss.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can work with Isabel to
So-
work that out.
I'm not asking for an answer, but I'm gonna ask anyway. So what type of time frame are you considering to bring something to the board, possibility of a pause? When are you thinking you would like a pause to go into effect, if indeed we decided that was in our best interest?
I would say my recommendation, Mason, I am responding to all of the concerns that we've all received. My recommendation would be June and July. I'm not sure, I'm happy to go back and during this time, visit again with the real estate community. I think having a better understanding of where some of their, contracts are currently at, get a better assessment of how many of those are tethered to the reliance or dependence on a permit, maybe get some investment
Financing and all that
inside
all
of
that other good
what,
stuff, yeah.
right, especially for those transactions that are close to the finish line. In fairness to them, I wouldn't want to completely destroy their process.
Perhaps looking at, any signed offer prior to the pause or something along that line. Since at this point we are talking about it, we don't know if it's going to happen or not.
Right.
And in the event that it does not, they will just continue to sign offers and do their work. And in the event that it does, should they have a signed offer prior to it, it seems like that might be reasonable. I think my other question is, and I don't know that we know the answer to this yet, is what action do we actually take, and does it require public hearings, and is there a process that goes with potentially taking a pause on a county program? Like the county council to know, is there a public process that we would have to do to pause the program?
If the board was considering doing this through an order, then it would be something that would be noticed with the agenda as a
And
discussion
discussed, of
and
course.
consideration item.
Okay, and so there is no required public hearing process or anything to pause this program?
Well, the public process would be this hearing.
Correct, but as
Yeah.
opposed to a land use type
No
of
public
process
hearing,
that
right.
requires 2 public hearings, et cetera, et cetera.
It doesn't sound like anyone's discussing to doing an ordinance.
Right.
So ordinances do require multiple public hearings,
Okay.
things like that. But if we're talking about doing this through a board order, then it would be the typical process of posting on the agenda that it's a discussion and consideration item. If there's a draft order to consider, posting that with the agenda, things like that.
And I think I would just encourage us, that I'm sure there will be people who will want to have the opportunity to speak to us in relation to this. And so as we talk about when we will do this, making sure that that information is perhaps out in the community slightly more, I don't want to say readily available, more, however, I would push out to the community in an intentional way. Because I think that it will be important for us to hear many voices in relation to this, so that we make sure that we're taking into account community's voice, not only those who have reached out to us thus far, but maybe those who haven't really, thought of that, but have intentional thoughts.
So I think it might be a good idea, and I don't know if this is possible, I hope it is, but maybe your department can put out a press release asking people to watch this portion of the video that Jane Scott is going to have online in anticipation of our meeting, whenever that would be. I think we need to get it out in the community to make sure everyone knows, everyone has the opportunity to weigh in.
I'd be happy to do that, and I can use the CAC chairs. I have a meeting with them this
Perfect.
coming Tuesday.
Perfect.
We will coordinate all of that so our communities have that notice.
Okay, okay.
And that would allow realtors, should they have the desire to come and
Yes.
speak to us as well, to have that opportunity. Again, I think, to me, it's very important, this doesn't appear to be something that was done in a dark corner somewhere, but rather that people understand that this is a current conversation among the Board of Commissioners here in a public meeting. That's the only, place that we can speak about it, and that we are wanting to make sure that it is, again, not a surprise.
Right. And I can also, the vacation rental managers and others, we have a great email distribution list. We'll make sure that we'll get that.
I do like the idea though of whenever the pause goes into effect, if indeed we put a pause into effect, any contract signed before that would be eligible possibly at the end of the pause. Contracts for property transfer signed after the pause, it's gonna depend on the caps in the community. So again, something I think that
Something
the
like that,
committee needs to look at.
Yeah, that
I
we
like
put them
idea.
in line for next available
Yeah.
permits,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think that the renters would appreciate that.
Okay.
So if there's something that can be done to, support them through these final transactions that are already expecting this.
I will make one other comment, however, in that what we see happening right now, I think, are people purposefully looking for homes to purchase to become a vacation rental. People need to understand that in my mind, that is a business. We're allowing businesses in our residential communities. So, these types of restrictions and rules and regs and issues of conduct for the vacation rental renters, this is all part, to me, in my mind, this is part of a business that we all need to understand is happening in Tacoma County. So,
And I think awareness that Orla, Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, has also begun to put a spotlight on these as what they are calling unregulated hotels, because they are not members of Orla. And so Orla is seeing it, I believe, as a challenge to the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association and their work. So I think that we are certainly part of a much larger conversation, and that we have the opportunity in Tillamook County to take action now to try to create the community that we want. Yeah, there's a lot of players and a lot of moving parts, I guess is why I add the Orla conversation. They sent out a white paper that very clearly identified this as an unregulated hotel issue.
Which, I think they have a point.
Yeah.
Because we have short-term rentals in the community that are definitely not part of our community.
Absolutely.
No one lives in them. There aren't local families associated with them. They were purchased or built with the intent, just the sole intent of short-term rental.
I would throw out one word of caution related to what may happen when if we were to pause short-term rentals, and if we are long-term, to set caps. In our coastal communities, there are properties that are properly zoned for hotels. And so I want people to recognize and realize as well that the potential to limit short-term rentals does not necessarily include limiting visitors to your community and the impacts therein, both daytime visitors and potentially there will be an increase in the number of hotels proposed in the zoned areas where hotels are allowed. So I just, it is a complex process of land use, and I throw that out there as a cautionary tale to think about, because I expect if we were to go down this road and very severely limit short-term rentals as an example, communities will begin to see hotels pop up instead, which they just need to be thoughtful about that, because we've had some proposals in the county for hotels that communities were not pleased with, and yet they are, from a land use perspective, hotels are allowed in the zone in which they are proposed. So we are a tourist destination, whether we like it or not. So just that foreshadowing to what may follow for everyone
Okay? Sarah, thank you. You've got the next item also, but I think we need to take a quick pause here.
Quick break.
So we do have, hang on just a minute, let me pull that up. I have it here somewhere. We have a time certain.
Time uncertain.
We have a time certain 10:30 a.m. second public hearing on discussion concerning legislative amendment request, blah, blah, blah. Beach and Dune hazard overlay, blah, blah, blah. We'll get to this. We're gonna take a quick pause here.
We do
for-
pauses.
different kind of a pause, sorry. Yes, I think we need a quick break. Let's take 10 minutes. Well, how about 8 minutes? 11, we'll come back at 11:30 a.m. for the second public hearing. We are in recess.